never met me before, my name is Leah Al-Hadi, and I'm the Executive Director of Fintech Cadence. I am really excited to be welcoming you guys back again in person. It has been a while. It's our first event, Fintech Cadence, for us this year, but hopefully not the last. We'll hopefully be doing a lot more and a lot more Fintech Drinks. So I'm really excited to kind of be talking you guys through what we're going to be doing today. I do see a lot of familiar faces. So before I get into what we do as an organization, let me ask you, how many of you have heard of who we are? Great, now this is the trick question. How many of you guys want to tell me who we are? I feel like I should test you guys out. Phil, what does Fintech Cadence do?
You guys are a community organization that helps foster fintech innovation in the ecosystem. You throw awesome events like this one and great public speaking events that have lots of insight and a Cadence program that helps startups get started.
I don't even need to be here. You want to switch That is not a plan, I swear. That was dry run rehearsal. Perfect. So yes, Phil, you actually said it better than I could say. So if you've never heard of us before, at large, what we're trying to do is advance the financial system to serve all Canadians for the better. And I know that seems quite lofty, but really what we're trying to do is ensure that there is innovation happening across all the financial sector, from startups, financial institutions, regulations, academia, et cetera. So if you're wondering, in that sense, what we're trying to achieve, that's exactly what it is. And concretely, what that means is we're trying to focus on three main things. The first thing is education. One, research commercialization is one thing that we do within education. So we want to see if there's any research happening in the university level that eventually makes its way into industry. That can be in the shape of a startup, or that can just be in the shape of research to be able to help financial institutions as well. The second thing we do in education is we are trying to be a little bit of evangelists in the curriculum of fintech. So we want to make sure that fintech is integrated across all master's, PhD, and undergrad level content and curriculum. And last but not least, for those of you guys who are here from university, we're trying to engage those of you who are in university to come and be involved in fintech. We want to make sure we have diversity of expertise and knowledge coming from the academic sector into the financial sector. So again, you don't necessarily have to be a founder to be involved in fintech, but we want you to engage with the financial sector to help push innovation forward. So far, so good? I haven't lost you yet? Perfect. All right, so let's go to the second thing, which is support. The second thing that Phil touched on that we do is we are trying to help very early stage startups. So usually the range of startups that we work with is anywhere from I have an idea all the way to about pre-series A. So that's about 1 million in investment. So if you have an idea and you're in that stage, please reach out to us. We have a lot of programs that help you and support you get to the next milestone. And if you're more advanced than that and you still want to get in touch with us, please let me know. We also have connections, contacts, and industry support across the whole pipeline of development of startups. And the last thing that we do is collaboration. So we work directly with financial institutions, regulators, and other stakeholders that are trying to push the financial sector forward. And we make sure that they have visibility and eyes on the ground in terms of what's happening with startups and innovation at large. Sounds good? I've said innovation quite a lot, so I think that's one of the key words you guys should be taking from this. We're basically trying to push innovation in the financial sector forward. I won't go through all of the programs because I think it's going to be a little bit draining, but what I do want you to know is that all of our programs are really focused on helping you guys achieve specific milestones. All of them that you see listed here are also available on our website. So if you are interested in learning more about our programs, you can do that. We do have a bit of information coming up with a certificate, so I'll get into that in a little bit. And we're currently just closed the application for our Ascension program, which is our capital focused raising program. And so we'll be making an announcement on that shortly. If you do have a startup and you are in that right stage, the early stage, then there is the FinTech Hub that's available for you as well. So check us out on our website and you get more information about that. We also do events, so I'm told. Fintech Drinks being one of them. We also have a university series. So if you are in university, in September, we'll be doing a few more events focused on engaging university students into our program. And last but not least, we do have a FinTech career fair. So if you are looking for work in the FinTech sector, be on the lookout for that as well. I'm also actually going to use that as a chance to be able to do a plug for Fintech Cadence. We are hiring quite a few positions. So if you are interested in working with the FinTech sector, either reach out to me online, for those of you who are online, or come talk to me right after the panel. I'm happy to give you more information about what positions we're hiring for as well. And if you are hiring, just let everybody know as well, or let us know. We're happy to share it within our Slack community or our newsletters as well to let people know. All right, I also want to thank three main community partners that we have that have been supporting us from the very, very early days. So I want to start off by thanking Montreal New Tech. I also want to thank Queer Tech Montreal that has been a big supporter of us. And none of this would be possible without the generosity of District 3. So we are currently in their space. They're a really cool incubator based out of Concordia, but not only limited to Concordia. They're sector agnostic. So if you are interested in getting more involved in the innovation space at large, I encourage you to go speak to them. And I think a few of them are here. Hi, they're back there waving shyly, but next to the alcohol. So there you go. Smartly, shyly. Wonderful. So I mentioned the certificate earlier on. If you guys are interested in learning a little bit more about FinTech, we do have two courses coming up towards the end of the certificate. One is around FinTech valuation, where you'll learn how startups are evaluated, what does the VC culture look like for FinTechs, and some of the portfolio companies that the VCs who are going to be speaking will be presenting. We do have one of the teachers who will be teaching in that here, which is Jan Arp of Holt Exchange. So he'll be one of the teachers there at the program. And then the last course that we'll be teaching is financial health and ESG. So if you are interested more in sustainability and ESG components of FinTech, that's a super interesting course, and it's taught by our very own Molly. All of them are remote. They take place on a Saturday from 12 to 4. But let us know, or you can look at the link there and register later, and you can find out more information as well. Okay. Last few things I just want to announce before we get started on the panel, the real reason why we're here today. And that is some of the community events that we are going to be participating in, although we're not hosting ourselves. So the first one is the Canadian FinTech Summit. Has anyone attended before, by the way? Perfect. David, Jan, you've been? David, Jan, perfect. So we do have a few people who have gone, but it's a really cool conference that takes place in Toronto. It brings the FinTech ecosystem together in the city, and some really cool connections and collaborations as well as discourse take place during those 2 days. If you are interested in attending, we do have discounted codes. So if you find yourself going to Toronto, let us know. The next one that is coming up is the Payment Summit, and that takes place from May 3rd to 5th in Toronto as well. If you're a startup looking to make deals there, let me know, because we are looking for startups to pitch. And if you do pitch during that during the 3 days, you will be given a free ticket to attend. Otherwise, we do have discounted tickets for you as well. And you can always reach out to Maria, she can wait, so that she can give you guys more information on these two events, as well as the third event, the last event that I'll be touching on, which is the Bankers Summit. And that is coming up as well, May 17th. So that is for anyone in Toronto as well. Don't worry, we host our events later in the year in Montreal, but we got to give Toronto a bit of space for the earlier events. So if you are interested in the Bankers Summit and meeting some of the banks and discourse happening around that, let us know. We do have free tickets for you to attend as well. Any questions? We powered through a lot of data. I'm not going to quiz you, but if you do have any questions, you can let me know for sure. All right, so we're here, as we said earlier, obviously for the panel. We are really excited about the topic today because we started to see, we've been in the FinTech ecosystem for quite a few years now, 6 years in the tech world, that's ancient. And we're starting to see quite a lot of waves happening around the conversation of FinTech. So is FinTech still exciting? There's quite a lot of challenging things happening, especially around open banking. If any of you followed the budget announcement that happened from the Canadian government, you know there's quite a few ramifications for the sector, real-time rails and the delays. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, don't worry, we'll get into it a little bit later. And if you do, then you know really the impacts that it has in FinTech in general. And so we really wanted to kind of bring everyone together, and especially our esteemed panelists, to kind of see what's really happening in FinTech. Is FinTech still a thing? Is it still as cool as we're all saying it is? Is it still exciting? Is there still a lot of things that are happening to look forward to? Or are we really entering the stagnant years where we're seeing less and less development as well? So without further ado, I'm going to slowly introduce the panelists one by one, and then I'm going to ask them to come up on the stage, and they'll do a very quick introduction of themselves as well. So Natasha, I will start with you. I will welcome you. Sorry, I gave you the wrong instructions, but there you go.
Here, since I put my glass here.
That's perfect. That is absolutely perfect. So Natasha is Open Banking Business Lead at Banque Nationale in Banque Nationale of Canada. You have been a long collaborator with FinTech Cadence, so we're really excited to have you here as well and representing. She has over 20 years of experience in IT delivery and digital strategy. She's also an innovation leader and key player in the National Bank of Canada's digital transformation. And she led the implementation of the first iteration of the bank's open banking channel, and she is currently business lead in its Open Banking Center of Excellence. So we're really excited to get more into that open banking dialogue that we've been having over the last few years.
Thanks for the invitation and thank you for being here. First, I'd like to say that it may sound complicated of what I'm doing, but my everyday job consists on delivering nice experience for customers and digital transformation. At National Bank as a leader, my job consists of keeping focus and adapting to the context. So whether it's regulatory, whether it's political, financial, human, it's about keeping the focus and collaborating with people, bring them together and transform, build great things. So I'm very pleased to be here.
Very, very excited. Thank you very much, Natasha. We can give her a warm round of applause. Up next, I'm going to call David Fry on.
Ladies first.
I'm trying to diversify.
Okay.
Women and
Well done, by the way.
Very, very exciting. Perfect. Thank you. So, David, I'm going to bring you up to the stage. David is the founder and CEO at Pays, a Toronto-based fintech. So, thank you for coming all the way to Montreal.
All the way.
You can ask him later which team he supports, by the way. He's going to have a great time with that. So he started life in 2018 as Canada's first BNPL, buy now, pay later provider for travel, but was forced to pivot when COVID shut down and the travel industry in 2020 had a lot of struggles. Today, Pays is a B2B fintech for auto finance solutions company focused on bringing auto finance into the 21st century. It is his third startup, so he is a serial founder.
Serial masochist, that makes sense.
But that makes you better at it. So I hear. Better at managing or dealing with that pain. After founding early startups in alternative asset management, loan and data and analytics. So you can see he has quite his wide spectrum in terms of things, all things fintech. So welcome, David. Thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you so much. I guess I'm the fin in fintech because I'm a reform banker,
Yes.
right? So I spent 20 years working for big global banks in London, New York, and Toronto, and doing credit, multi-syllable words like derivatives and 3- and 4-letter acronyms, some of which became 4-letter words in the credit crisis. And I guess I've been in fintech since before it was called fintech, which was 2015, and seen a lot of ups and downs, but really excited about the trend and the massive opportunity, I think, which we get to talk about tonight. So thanks again.
Great. Thank you for coming in. Last but not least, I'm going to welcome up Megan Smolder from Conduit. Megan is VP People Operations at the company and is an operator and investor with a broad perspective on business building. She was part of the early founding team of Password Box, driving GTM and product growth strategies from 0 to millions. And here, millions is good. So that's great. Of customers worldwide. She later joined Diagram Ventures, a foundry and venture capital firm specializing in financial services, before joining Conduit, where she leads people and company growth today. So welcome, Megan.
Thank you.
All right.
Go for it.
I'm good. I feel the intro is good.
Wonderful. Okay, so just a few housekeeping rules. I will, of course, be asking the first few questions, but this really is a dialogue. So if you guys want to ask anything, if you want to elaborate on any of the things that have been spoken by the panel, just wave at me. I will manage the questions accordingly. And we also do have a question and answer period at the end. I also want to take this chance to welcome everybody who is online. So thank you very much for attending. We have not forgotten about you. We know you're here. We're very excited to engage with you as well. If you have any questions to our panelists, please do put them on the chat. I have direct access here on my phone. I swear I'm not checking my messages. And we'll be able to include them to the panelists as well. Sounds good? Perfect. All right, everyone ready to get started? I'll try not to block you. That's great. All right, David, let's start with you.
Okay.
Yes. Is fintech still a thing in Canada?
Of course it is.
Thank you very much. That's all we have.
Right?
Yeah, right. Just like that.
You're going to say why. So let's start with a couple of things. So I think that the most important thing for me is that the size of this industry, which, if you don't know already, is the biggest industry vertical on the planet. So take away this number, $10 trillion. $10 trillion. Financial services have been around for millennia, right? So we have something, we need to exchange it, we create a currency, that's called financial services, right? So those things aren't going to change, I think, and we'll discuss kind of like the reasons for why we're having this conversation, I guess. But what I would say is that fintech now, to me, I think, which has always always been this way, but I think it's a bit clearer now. It's an idea, it's a philosophy. It's not necessarily a company. It's a way of doing things. And given that we just had, I can say Blue Jays in Montreal, so it's okay, right?
That's okay.
Right? So
That's
Blue Jays, okay. Expos, yeah. Anyway, what a baseball analogy would be in terms of fintech, we're probably, the third pitch in the first inning of this. There's a long way to go.
Perfect. I know sometimes we often say we're in the teenage years, and so there's a lot of rebellion happening with the ecosystem, but I like the baseball analogy, even though I don't understand anything. I'm guessing that's the answer. Natasha, do you want to?
Yeah, sure. So the answer is definitely yes. We have a strong industry, a strong financial industry here in Canada, and there's been a growing number of fintechs that promote an amazing experience that can be promoted to fintechs. We've been seeing collaboration, maybe not to the extent that we wish for, but collaboration between financial institutions more and more with fintechs that are integrating and that taking their experience to embed them in their own system. So this is great for customers. And also took a few notes. There's a large market. I believe we have 38 million users that are avid of new solutions in Canada. Something you already know, but COVID promoted, adoption and early adopters. And I would say we have a strong penetration for web and smartphones. So yes, the opportunities are wide open. And technology is evolving. We have a lot of talent, not enough, but yes, we'll talk about talent a little later.
We have a whole full room full of people who are excited about fintech, right? So hopefully this is the beginning of the talent pipeline. Megan, your perspective on fintech.
Yeah, I mean, so Conduit, our company, right? We initially started to build in Canada and realized really quickly that what we were building in the space we were in, we had to think bigger. So it was this idea of Canada first, US quickly. And I think that building in Canada, what's really unique about it is that there is such a tight ecosystem to learn and fail quite quickly, whether it's through network effect, through investors, through communities and things like that. But where companies grow and scale, I think that is still one of our biggest challenges, is because people think, oh, I'm going to be a Wealthsimple tomorrow. Wealthsimple has been building for the last 10 years. It is not an overnight success. These things take time because of the nature of how people and consumers engage with financial technology. And so I think there's a common misconception of yes, this is the place where you can make a company really big, but I think that there's a market, there's an ability to serve, but also thinking strategically, big growth does come from outside of Canada because of our population size, our regulations, and other things like that come to play.
Perfect. How many of you guys are familiar with the tough regulation sector here in Canada? I just want to poll the audience to make sure we're not missing anything. So that's wonderful. Thank you very much.
You should raise it really high.
One of the things that we have noticed at Fintech Cadence, and please do correct me if you guys don't see it in your respective stakeholder vision that you have, is that we're starting to see less and less fintechs get created. So I know 3-4 years ago, there was a wave of fintechs that were starting. I know in 2021, there was a wave of investment coming into the sector, and I know now we're saying we're kind of evening things out. But what's your perspective on the fact that we might have less companies be started? And because of that, part of the reason we think is because of how difficult it is to build in Canada, but would love to hear about that from your perspective. And Megan, we'll start with you first.
Yeah, I think there's a bunch of different things, right? You look at the market last year to where we're at today, we're possibly entering a recession. There's high interest rates. There's a lot of financial system instability right now abroad and in Canada, and a lot of people being concerned of what this looks like. So I think that just the market adapting to what's going on right now. People are nervous and they're trying to see where the dust settles. So I think that's one reason why we're seeing a little less action. I think the second is from the venture point of view is a lot of the VCs that we have in Canada, they've made their bets, right? The fintech market, when you think of traditional payments, when you think of neobanks, these companies have said, okay, these are the bets that they think are going to make it big. And now with this market uncertainty, they have to keep some reserve to be able to follow on in those investments. And so when you pair that with the market today, I think that we're going to see a slow for the next 12 to 18 months, and then a shift once that confidence comes back. But I think that this slowdown is not a bad thing. This is just, again, adapting to the market that we're in.
The reality that we're facing. I don't want to be too politically motivated in our conversation right now, but we know obviously with what happened with Silicon Valley Bank had a lot of impact in the US. Do you see that impact has translated to Canada as well?
I think it's translated in the sense of just people needing to see where the dust is going to settle. They're more cautious. They want to make sure that their due diligence when they're doing evaluations of different companies for both their LPs and the firms as a whole is much more put together. They want to make sure that these companies are viable. They're not just, a scheme that comes up because it's hot. Can this business actually grow? And so I think the impact is really just a perception shift for what we have right now. And then again, as that confidence rebuilds, I think that will change.
Right. So it's almost like just the blip in the market that will autocorrect. Yeah. Perfect. Natasha, do you want to touch on that as well?
And I don't want to absolutely not repeat anything that you said, but I want to say that I fully approve. I would add, I talked about talent just before, but there's maybe some talent required. We see a lot of people, a lot of talent in AI and machine learning, and I'm suggesting that we should improve, university challenges, bring, subventions to help them promote development of this technology and this talent and this expertise to put forward the market. So maybe talent is one of the things. And you mentioned about the regulatory hurdles. Well, that's the same. We're hoping things are going to be moving forward. We wait. And then it's stop it. So it's a stop and go situation that doesn't help today. So this might be one of the reasons too.
I think even on the Canadian side, right, a lot of US companies have now been able to see that there's really great talent in Canada. And so Conduit being a global distributed company, we hire all over the world. But talking to big fintechs like Ramp or Brex or others, they're actually hiring in Montreal and in Canada, taking that talent away from other startups that would be offering really good salaries. And so from a talent perspective, it's interesting. You have a much broader spectrum of opportunity that you did not have a year or 2 years ago before, but also from the startup ecosystem side, causing more challenges, right? Is being able to get the talent you need to start something and grow those companies. There's been a shift there too.
And there's a relation with the regulatory too, because you're building the expertise and then if there's a stop and then you're losing expertise. So this creates a lot of hurdles.
David, I'm assuming you're going to disagree with everything.
How about I'll take a higher level view, right?
Yeah.
It was actually, I did my MBA a long time ago, different school kind of over there. But
That should not be named.
1994, that'll really date me. I remember I was working on a bond desk and a fellow by the name of Alan Greenspan was chairman of the Fed at the time. And he did something that people haven't seen in quite a long time, which was raise interest rates. And I'd say for the last, pretty much since, the early 2000s, but certainly since the credit crisis, we've really only known an economy that has seen very low to almost no interest rates, right? And there's all manner of evil that can be created with 0% interest rates that manifests itself into businesses that really have no business of being a business, but based on 0% interest rates can exist. And as Warren Buffett likes to say that when the tide goes out, you see who's been swimming naked. And so Jerome Powell, who's now the chairman of the Fed, based on obviously a lot of inflationary pressures, which may or may not have been catalyzed by COVID, we've seen something that a lot of people haven't seen before, which is higher interest rates. And the way, mathematically, not to bore you, that manifests itself into valuations is that, you're discounting cash flows or discounting earnings of companies back, right? And, if you divide anything by 0, wow, that looks great because it's infinity, right? But actually, when we put 1.05 over the annual, that discount rate changes the valuation of company. So getting to the question of like, why are we seeing less fintech? It's not just fintech, it's everything has been revalued in this new way, right? And we could argue, and I think there's a good argument to say that the last 3 or 4 years previous to this, that was the aberration, right? That was the abnormality. Now we're just getting back to more historical norms of what interest rates have been. And you know what? It's not a bad thing, right? Because it's a cleansing, it's washing out like a lot of the people have been swimming naked and businesses that have been swimming naked.
Perfect. So you can't bore me with math, you can bore me with baseball.
Yeah.
So I appreciate the different, I'm just kidding.
By the way, those are pretty tight too. Billy
Remind
won't
me
know
of that
anything.
movie. What was that movie with
Brad Pitt.
Moneyball, there we go. Perfect. See, I watched TV. Perfect. And so David, I'm gonna still keep it on you for a second, and I want to see, because now you've built a fintech through the wave, the low interest rate, and now you're building your fintech continuously here. So as a founder, what are the challenges you're facing today that you didn't face a few years ago?
Yeah, so some of it's idiosyncratic with us in the sense that we kind of rode, like a lot of people did, the fintech wave of B2C, right? And everyone's gonna, that first wave of, we're gonna disrupt everything. The banks, we're gonna put them out of business, and they're gonna just do things a lot better than them. And then reality sets in that your CAC, your customer acquisition costs are like $500 each, and like, how are we gonna be able to pay for that? But I think a lot of that has been, rightly or wrongly, has been washed away now, right? So it was always difficult in Canada, I think, to create a B2C fintech. Now I'd say it's impossible, right? Like if you were to start a Wealthsimple today, good luck, right? So that for us, that maybe we got washed out a bit too, right, with that. And then we saw that, well, we built all this tech. It wasn't just cool technology, it was really useful technology, where we started looking at the partners that we had, and we started thinking of them as actually customers. And so the wave that we're riding now is that fintech is actually going to be a tool that a lot of incumbents and slower moving institutions are going to need. And maybe they can't move as fast as we can, but we can sure help them get there faster. So imagine like we've gone from complete, B2B to C to B2B now, enterprise software. Enterprise means, wow, now you're selling to banks. And so that has its own idiosyncratic challenges. But I think part of it too is that, yeah, we're in a place, as Megan said, where it's difficult to begin with. We have, I don't know if everybody knows that the most insured nation per capita is Canada, right? What does that mean? We don't like to take risk, right? So imagine you're starting a new business, right? And whether you're going after consumers, whether you're going after small businesses or corporations, it takes a lot to kind of get that flywheel going, to prime the pump, right? So you're dealing with that. I'd say generally that, and I don't look for government to support and to do everything, but I think generally, I'm saying this taped, right? So here I go. Yeah, okay. Probably a bit more of a hindrance than a help, I think. And a lot of that gets into like Canada as an innovation economy and a center of innovation, and things that we need to do to promote that. And that's anecdotally true if you look at patents and IP that we're actually creating. It's a minuscule fraction of what happens in the US. And yeah, maybe we shouldn't compare ourselves to the US because they are the most innovative economy on the planet, but it certainly is a good benchmark for us to follow in terms of a roadmap of how to be doing things better, right? So anyway, I won't go on anymore.
No, it's really great. I think I'm going to come to the questions in 1 second. I think there's one thing I want to kind of go back to, which is the B2C comment. So B2C is when you're selling directly to consumers versus selling to consumers through another business, B2B2C versus selling to a business directly, B2B. In Canada, like you said earlier on in the fintech wave, there was a lot of products that were trying to go directly to consumers, and now we're moving away from that, as you just said, towards the end. But I do want to go back a little bit to elaborate on why that is the case. I know you've touched on one or two things, but truly, especially now when we meet with a lot of the venture capitalists here, they're not interested in funding a startup that's B2C. They're not interested in even having a dialogue with that. So I'm curious to see from your perspective, in case anyone here wants to build a B2C, and this is for anyone who wants to jump in, by the way, why it's harder now to kind of build a B2C specifically. And does that just mean that consumers are going to suffer because there's not too many innovations being directed towards them, and they're going through businesses to develop innovation?
I mean, I think, to be honest, it's how we default to think about fintech as well, too, right? When I think fintech, if I'm just being broad, I probably think of a neobank, or I probably think of payments, or I probably think of something in this realm, right? And you think of the number of those type of companies we need, there's not that many. Maybe one or two, there's competitive pricing, there's few niches that you can carve in these things, right? Like you see in any product. But the way that I'm trying to think differently about fintech moving forward, and a lot of the, I guess, feedback I've gotten too, is that fintech takes a lot of different shapes and forms. And so, moving really high up, I can talk to like the global view. Like in Africa, cell phone minutes are a currency. You pay people by passing cell phone minutes to each other. In Argentina, you have a horrible inflation. Like you get paid on a Friday and by Sunday it's 14% inflation. You've lost your paycheck. So people put them into crypto just to hold it. It's a holding mechanism, a savings account. It's not that they're paying necessarily with it, but they find other ways. Or in China, you have, video cameras that are surveilling everything, and that's your AML and compliance. Like, I think that just thinking, but like in the essence of it, right, is they use this as a way to build credit for people in ways that are like the financial system, just done differently. And so I think that when thinking about fintech and new companies and what this looks like, broadening your view, it's not just the neobanks and the payments and these tiny little things in between, right? It's what are other things that can really help make this difference? Like AI is the topic right now. Can AI help people spend, save, and financial plan better? Probably. What does that look like? Like that is a niche of fintech that shows a much different application at scale than maybe a direct B2C play.
That's amazing. And things are really coming full circle because I know 5 years ago we were also talking about AI.
Yes.
And now we're coming back to
Yes.
Natasha, do you want to add anything on that?
I can, but as a banker, so as a financial institution, of course, we're going to look for B2B partnership. And when you put into play the open banking, it is then that you can think about sharing the customers. So there's new opportunities that can be created as a B2B2C. So this is where it becomes very interesting for financial institutions. So, and there's another point about trust. So everything about privacy. If you want to, reach the customer, you have to show them that you're trustful and that you can protect their data. And people are getting more and more sensitive about the protection of the data. So it's harder. So working with a financial institution not necessarily means nothing's going to happen, but it's proof that banks are trustful.
Absolutely. David, I'll let you have the last word if you want to add anything onto that.
Banks are trustful. Should I take the opposite? As long as it's not Silicon Valley Bank. Look, I think I agree that we do live in an economy that banks play a pretty key role, and we have in some way, one side of my mouth wants to say that sort of stifles innovation. The flip side is that in banking, it's always about where's the money, right? And like, is it safe? And I think that, when we start moving money, we start lending money, it all gets back to our ability to actually, what the lawyers would call perfect the security interest, and like it's ours, right? At any given moment, we know what it is. And it doesn't even take a Silicon Valley bank to know that the Canadian banking system is not like that at all.
And that's what I like about open banking, because it's about expanding trust in the financial framework with multiple players.
And if only 5 larger banks than you thought that way, say that again on the tape.
We're happy to be promoting it. Like you're talking to the person that actually
we're singing
built
to the
it.
choir.
Yeah. So.
We'll make sure that's edited out by I know, Tarek, you had a question. Did you want to jump in?
Yeah, I did. You kind of answered a little bit of them because they're similar to your question. But like, I come from a completely different market. So you touched on Africa. I've been in Africa. I've been exposed to that, and I've worked with like London startups, Europe. If you do that comparison, I'm just curious of why you say it's difficult to have another simple Canada. And yeah, it's a bit redundant to what you said, but isn't it the point? Isn't it the point to create those new experiences, those different ways, and especially coming from a completely different world? I come to a place where banks are charging so much fees, controlling the user experience at a very bad level with not a lot of options. So yeah, it's very easy to move from one bank to the other. They all give you the same thing. So I'm just curious why you say
Africa's
harder now, because the trend tends to be the other way around. Even in collaboration, like a lot of them are BIN sponsors or like
partners
Yeah.
provide the infrastructure for these.
So as Megan said, that in Africa, you can have your bank on your phone. Like actually, literally, the bank is your phone,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because there are no physical. So Africa's actually been able to leap in terms of waves, like right over the rest of the developed world, where we have a lot of legacy infrastructure, right? And the legacy infrastructure in the case of physical people, physical locations, physical oriented processes, and then supporting that are literally, sorry to say this, green screens that sit somewhere that people are afraid to unplug because they don't even know what it does, right? But if you unplug it, everything goes down, kind of thing. That gets into like data silos and all sorts of other things that really prohibit. Then if you were to build something from scratch and have a holistic view of this customer, whether they be an individual, a small business, a corporation, we do it totally differently, right? So there's a lot of that it doesn't, people like Natasha, it's not like she's the only one at National Bank that thinks that way. There's a lot of them that think that way, but they're tied a bit to kind of like legacy, right? Legacy of doing things. But what they have and what they will say, and the bigger banks, the National Bank will say a lot is, well, we have the customers and we have the money and they trust us, right? And so if you think of like, if I'm going to go start a disruptive fintech that's going to go after that, I'm just saying today, it's a whole other ball of wax in terms of like, just focus on one number. Then if you want to boil it down, it's 3 letters called CAC, right? Customer acquisition cost. You can focus on the other 3-letter if you want to, LTV, right? And then we can play with unit economics and all the VC textbook, whatever. But CAC really has changed, I think, pretty dramatically, like in the last 5 years. And so if you think of like, you're going to need to scale the business into the tens to the hundreds of thousands of people. Just ask the folks at Neo right now, right? Mm-hmm. Like, that's a huge number. They're not a public company, but I guarantee you that the CAC on, now they're competing, Questrade comes out with their new savings thing. Neo's got a EQ bank, right? And who are they fighting? They're fighting big banks, dude. How much money do you think they spend on advertising every year in customer acquisition? You know how much it is now for a bank, what a bank would pay for someone's checking account as an acquisition fee? About $800. $800, right? You know how much they pay for a credit card, like with someone like Borrowell or Credit Karma? About $300, right? So that's what you're up against, right? Those are real numbers. So think about then the problem you're trying to solve, think about the quantum of it, the delta of how much value is there, and then start building those numbers in. And it's tough. That's all I'm saying.
And one thing to keep in mind too, right, is when a venture capital firm or angels invest, like they want to see growth, right? They want a return on their investment. That's not to say that you can build a viable business that is able to own a niche and generate capital that's not going to grow with a rocket full of VC, right? And so like there's this trend right now of these micro businesses, right? Of being able to do things that reach, $5-10 million in ARR monthly, right? Or, whatever that looks like. For what you are building, there's a lot of different ways that startups can succeed.
I'm going to quickly pause to jump in because there's quite a few acronyms.
Oh, sorry. ARR is annual, but monthly as well too, right? Like whatever you're breaking it out to be in a way that builds a business. Yes.
More.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Did you want to jump in on that?
I just wanted to double click on the legacy word because it's totally true. And, I like to turn things into opportunities. You guys have great talent and great experience that can be embedded into the financial institutions. We can work together and share customers.
I come from network, by the way, like previously, so I was in the middle.
Can I just say something too? That what the banks have, if we go back to the chat GPT-4 world, and Bloomberg just announced something really cool as well. Why is it cool? Because Bloomberg sits on a mountain of financial data that nobody else has, right? And that's what you're going to need to kind of really train these things and make them really useful. You know who else sits on a lot of data? The banks. The banks, right? So imagine then I'm a startup and I'm trying to, and not to say that a bank and GPT-4, that sounds like a bit of an oxymoron right there, but AI, like the banks are spending a lot of money on AI, that much I know. And so on that mountain of data can come a lot of interesting things.
Perfect. I'm going to shift gears a little bit here, and then I'll open it back again to the audience. And I want to touch on open banking because we've talked about it a bit today. And I will say we're always hesitant, especially at Fintech Cadence when we're running events, not to bring up open banking because it's been talked about ad nauseum at this point in the ecosystem. But we cannot go amiss without, first of all, having you on our panel and not discussing it, but second of all, seeing the announcement with the federal budget that came out a few days ago, a week ago.
Yep.
Some time ago.
You mean the lack of the announcement?
Lack of the announcement. So for those of you who are following, and if you don't know too much about open banking, come see me afterwards. I'm happy to spend a bit of time going over it, but there was no real commitment from a federal level to ensure that open banking is going to be not only expanded on, but continued in a sustainable way, let alone scaled up quite extensively. So I'm looking at you and making eye contact with you, Natasha, but you don't have to answer on behalf of the Canadian government. But just very curious to hear, especially if somebody working in open banking for one of the big banks in Canada, really, what is happening? What can fintechs really look at and see?
So the person here can tell you that, all the financial institutions are still engaged and collaborating to get it together to make it happen. So we're working intensively together to make things happen. Then we're not the government. We're not going to be, putting the pace together. But I'm very proud that National Bank, has put forward the first version of an open banking concept. And we have already 40 fintechs into the system, into Fling Southbound today. And we're happy to collaborate and to promote what we have done and how we did it. And then, I have trust and confidence that it's going to happen. But yes, it's going to take some time. And we've seen it real time. Rail is the same. It takes some time to put things together. But it's going to happen.
Can I just say a plug for National Bank? And I'm not getting paid for this, obviously. But they have taken the lead on the Canadian banks and moving open banking forward. So that's been a great thing to see.
Yeah, absolutely. And for those of you who haven't followed the news, I think it was a year ago, if I'm not mistaken, if not two.
Yeah,
COVID time kind of
December 2021.
Perfect, where you acquired Flinks. So one of the biggest components of proponents.
Actually, it's when we went in production.
Went
Was
to
the
production.
first build, yes.
Perfect, there you go. Okay, very, very excited to see what's coming out of that. I am curious, Megan, from your perspective, especially maybe in the States, less so the Canadian, what's happening with banking in Canada, but anything to kind of add to what the dialogue in the States coming out of how data is being used with fintechs.
I mean, data is king, right? You're able to build and adapt businesses in ways that you couldn't before. And I see this also a bit of a problem, right? Because a lot of people don't understand the granularity of how their data is actually being used, right? And so then you look at other places in Europe where they're much more compliant and have rigorous rules in place to monitor this stuff. It's hard to know on the spectrum of what is right and wrong. Like it feels like from, again, on the US side and, Conduit, we're building the company primarily based US, but for emerging markets, right? It's been interesting to see and interact and how people, I guess, respond to what's okay and what's not. It's just very, very different.
Yeah, I can imagine that, especially in contrast.
And it's very interesting to look at what others have done and how they built, the ecosystem. And we can learn from that.
Yeah.
And make some calls to how are we going to make it work. So
absolutely perfect. And then David, I'm going to come to you again last from a founder perspective in terms of the importance that you see, or the urgency, let's say, of how you see open banking being needed right now.
Yeah, so we're fixing something right now that's one of the worst customer journeys you could ever imagine, which is you want to buy a car and then inevitably you need to finance it. And from the beginning of that journey to the end are all sorts of crazy things that involve fax machines and buggy whips and things that should have been extinct a long time ago. And part of our solution when we get into thinking about a lot of people are required to do something called proof of income. That process today, which is again pretty antiquated, manual, analog, paper-based. There's a pretty easy solution to that, right? And then we're using the hacked version of that now, right? The screen scraping. But I think as we move into, and we're moving really quickly now into a digital world where customers want to do more things digitally. People that are doing payments or lending want to enable that. But guess who also wants to party and play in that? Fraudsters, in a massive way, right? And just, we're spending a lot of time not only thinking about GPT-4 or ChatGPT from a user perspective, but also from a fraud perspective, because that's a double-edged sword, right? So we think that open bank, and think about, so what we're trying to solve for is fraud, but also time, right? And customer journeys, right? And auto financing. But think about, I'm sure in Montreal, like there is in Toronto, there's mortgage fraud going on all over the place, right? There's people that are listing other people's houses, right? They come back from holiday and there's a for sale sign on their front lawn. It's like people like going into an open house, hey, what are you doing here? So as we move into that, so these are problems to solve, people, right? Like these are things like, so think of like a lot of these manual analog processes and solutions that are kind of built for, last century. Now we want to move all this online. That's opening up an opportunity for fraudsters, right? So we need to figure that out. But then we also need to, we've got all these customers that, like, we can't do this way. Are you kidding me? Like, there's no way we can do it that way. And if anything that makes online banking look good, which is, you put like a fintech, like a US neobank or something like that, and then online bank, and then you get into mortgage and auto financing. It's like, you're kidding me, right? So I think open banking has a big role to help, with authentication, with payments, and really, pull, and pull or enable, I guess, this sector to be, brought into the 21st century.
Perfect. Thank you very much for that. Any questions around open banking? Okay, sorry. Your name?
Bedad.
Bedad?
Yes.
Nice to meet you, Bedad. Go ahead.
So I just wanted to discuss like the implementation of open banking and like kind of discuss why it's taking so long. I mean, you touched on the point that perhaps it's about like fraud and trust and keeping all of this information safe. But I mean, my startup uses Plaid as an intermediary, which is one of Flints' competitors. And I mean, Plaid is still using screen scraping in Canada. I think Flints is probably still using screen scraping across many banks in Canada. Isn't that more of like a trust and a trust issue compared to if we had actual open banking with secure API access and real like secure data? My thought process
Yes.
is like, why are banks waiting so long for government to take action? Because they can just take action without government regulations. They can just move from screen scraping to secure APIs and make that like underlying technology happen without waiting first for the government to take action. And then once the government takes action, then it's like another 2-3 years for the banks to start developing their stuff. Now they have to go ahead, but they don't really need to go ahead.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much for that question. I'm going to see if anyone wants to tackle it.
Yeah,
Point.
so, like I won't answer for national because obviously we're there and we're trying to promote it as much as possible and to make it happen, to promote the innovation because it's going to open up new innovation once we're there. But I can't say exactly why.
Can I say why then?
I
know what you don't want to say.
I'm
but I'll say
gonna
it.
play devil's advocate, but I'm gonna deflect you. Yes, answer the question.
So like this technology is going to be, what is it going to do, right? Like at its best, when it's fully OAuth, fully safe, private, whatever, it's going to create much more fluidity of customers. Okay, right? So remember, I spent $800, right, on my acquisition fee to get that checking account and $300 to get the credit card, and now I'm going to sell them a mortgage and maybe some insurance and all that good stuff, right? And then somebody comes in and says, hey, I want you to connect this guy, this individual through open banking so that 10 other financial institutions can go and grab them. What are you going to say to that, right? Well, why would we do that? That's the first question. Why would we do that, right? Well, the customer actually wants it. Well, it's not their data, it's our data. Actually, it turns out no, it's actually that actually happened. And so, okay, it's the customer's data. So we're going to get there, but you think of like, what's the incentive then for the big 5 banks, right? What's the incentive for number 6? It's pretty clear, is they want to go after the big 5 bank customers. But what's the incentive for 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5? A lot less so.
So I'll say monetization. So data sharing is free for the retail customers, for instance. So if you look at the customer for the commercial business, every single services in financial institution are monetized. So in the roadmap, if we're just talking about data sharing, it's not enough. Payment needs to be in the game.
So it's about charging for the access of that data.
No, it's not about charging for the access, but it's about promoting payments within the scope of open banking. Because data sharing is not enough. So to keep the market and the competition, it needs to happen, for financial institution at the same time as fintech. This would be fair game for everybody.
You mean RTR? Is that what you're saying?
Well,
What's on rails?
RTR will be part of it.
Like the movement of money.
Yes.
Right.
Okay, guys, so we have less than 5 minutes, so I'm going to quickly try and see if we can fit the last 7 questions in there. I think there's maybe two main areas I want to make sure we touch on that I think everyone also, or I'm assuming everyone wants to kind of touch on it. One is, and Megan, I'm going to come to you here to really look at digital currency and crypto. So I know that's a big conversation that's happened, hasn't had the best track record in Canada in the last year. So now your perspective from Conduit and from your perspective on where you see the progress of that developing as well.
Look, I think that any new technology that comes out, as David said, there's opportunities for fraud and Ponzi schemes and all of these different things. It is a natural progression of anything. And so specifically in Canada, and in general, I think the hype that we've seen over the last year, people jumping into this without understanding and knowing what cryptocurrencies, where their money is going, what this looks like. Some of it because it's very complicated to be able to understand and know, like, what is a protocol? What happens in a protocol? What does this look like? Or where does my money go? But then also just people's ability to understand and build and see what that actually looks like. And so I think that applications of these take different shapes and forms. And so in Conduit's case, as I said, we help fintechs and neobanks that want to be able to move from fiat to crypto more seamlessly through an infrastructure layer. And where this makes a really big difference is cross-border payments. There's somebody who is in the United States who wants to be able to send investment funds to African fintech technologies, right? Or fintech companies. They're able to do that more seamless, faster, make it easier. In Argentina, being able to do payroll use cases, where again, it's that conversion where the use case of it is, I need to retain my money in a way, but I'm still using my local currency to pay it without paying crazy fees and transactions and timing to get that done. So I think that the technology behind crypto and blockchain, you are still seeing the big companies like MasterCard, Visa, Shopify, all building in this space still because it is a new avenue that will continue to grow in the financial sector. I think just people assume too many things with the word crypto. It's a speculative asset. It's not the technology and what use cases or opportunities there actually is to use it.
I feel that. Absolutely. Any last thing on the crypto digital currency world?
Megan's the expert.
You guys will pass on. Perfect. I'm going to do one last question from the audience. Anyone? Yes.
I have a separate question. He asked my first question, kind of. You talked about talent in Canada really quickly. So I'm an independent consultant. I work in the payment space, and I work with software providers or independent software vendors, and I help them. I help them project manage. I teach them how to turn payments into revenue. And it's a really big niche. You talk about payments and you talked about niches, and I'm in like the tiniest of niches. And, I would love to work for a Canadian company. I'd love to work for a bank or, be an advisor. But it's nearly impossible because of the size of software businesses and how, the size of our population and the banks. There's the top 5, top 6. They don't like to outsource a lot. So I was just really curious on, what your overall perspective was on consulting or hiring outside advisors. And right now I'm working for US clients. There's a lot of people who are just like me, tired of working the 9 to 5. And we're targeting the US. And we're doing that for USD, and because there's over 16,000 software companies there. Yeah. So kind of a broad question, but if you guys could touch base a little bit on talent and how you could see, maybe keeping some more of our talent at home so that we're benefiting the Canadian economy as opposed to, I mean, we're still benefiting the Canadian economy. I just don't like USD money here, but do you know what I mean?
Thank you very much.
Long question, sorry.
That's okay, thank you very much for the
By
question.
the way, that sounds like a good problem to
It's
have.
not-
Just saying.
But I would love it, I'd love to work locally, and it gets kind of tiring being on Zoom for, day in and day out. I would love to be able to help a Canadian company.
Absolutely, and
but it's
engage
hard
in
for me to
Fintech
source those
Drinks
leads.
as well, so
Yeah.
perfect.
It's hard to find those leads.
I absolutely understand. So
Yeah.
anyone want to touch on that very quickly on the panel?
Well, I'll say expertise in payment is kind of rare to have the big picture. So
Yeah.
good for you.
Thank you.
And it'd be nice if we could promote more development of talent like this through maybe special funds, through educational programs in university, but developing innovation, and especially AI and payments. That'd be great.
Yeah,
Machine learning.
yeah, love it.
Perfect. Anything else?
I mean, like from my point of view, right, is you're right, where the money to be made is abroad. And that's a function of one, the density of companies and talent that are needed in these different geographies. I think looking in Canada and where, being able to make that difference, a lot of it is really through network. I find that having a super niche expertise, especially in the payment space, like the bigger banks, the bigger companies that would be hiring something like this, they know who they need to talk to and what that looks like. But I'd say mid to smaller stage companies don't necessarily have that exposure. And so depending on if you're looking for consulting work in these pockets or areas, it's really getting out and meeting people and being able to talk to them, but knowing that our market is much smaller and the talent density is not there. And so as a solo entrepreneur for yourself too, right? Do you go where the money is, or do you go to help out and do better? And it's a balance of both, right? Like I think paying it forward and helping develop the market's really important, but it's just understanding that this is the reality, and like great organizations like Fintech Cadence are trying to help solve that, but it takes time.
Yeah.
It takes time.
Thank you very, very much. Okay, so I'm going to wrap up the panel with one last question. We started off by talking about is fintech still a thing in Canada? Just very quickly, we're going to go with each of you guys. Do you think if you're really excited by it, you're going to wait and see what happens, or you think we've gone backwards in terms of development?
I don't think we've gone backwards. I think look, we've had a crazy year. I think I've lived 100 years in the last 12 months. And so from that point of view, let the dust settle. Let's see where it goes. We have this saying at Conduit, it's a beaver market. Beavers are always building. And so right now everybody is freaking out that the world is ending. And this is the best time to build because there's great talent, there's great resources, and an opportunity to build ideas that are sustainable to get through this. But I think that in the long tail, a big opportunity for growth.
Amazing. Natasha.
We need to, have stamina and keep focus and adapt. Yes, the context is evolving, the technology is evolving, and the talent is as well. So you have to trust that we're going to keep moving forward. We're not going to go backwards. It's impossible.
Perfect. And last but not least,
The
David.
problems exist, they're getting worse. Follow the problems, solve the problems. It's a big $10 trillion industry that's got lots of problems. Solve the problems, make money by solving the problems.
Perfect. So lots of opportunities. Amazing. So just before you guys get off the stage, I really just want to kind of quickly summarize what we just went over. So we talked about digital currencies, talked about baseball, which hopefully you guys remember. Thank you for those who are laughing at my jokes, by the way. It just gets better from here. Touched on open banking, the importance of open banking, and 6 years on still how open banking is a topic of conversation.
Yeah.
Talked a lot about founders and the opportunities available and talent as well. So I want to thank each of our panelists, David, Natasha, and Megan, for coming and spending time with us. Please do give them a warm Before you guys go, I'm gonna ask you to sit over with us for 2 more seconds. Before you guys go, you can tell that a lot of conversations happen within a very short period of time. The purpose of these panels is not to solve every problem that's available, but rather to spark conversations that are happening. So I really hope that you guys feel comfortable to go up to our panelists after this, ask them more questions, start building these solutions like David suggested, because we do need a lot more founders, or start engaging with those of you guys who are in the ecosystem to help push the ecosystem forward. And I'm going to try and help you guys out a little bit by asking how many of you guys here are founders? Perfect. Take a look. How many of you guys work for a financial institution? Yeah, you guys are like, yeah. Perfect. How many of you guys work for a regulator? Okay, perfect, good. You don't want to admit it, I get it. And how many of you guys are university students looking to get into fintech? Perfect, okay, so hopefully you guys kind of took English words, you took stock of who raised their hands for what. There is alcohol and food and drinks available. Don't forget that we do this once a quarter, so we will have a lot of events coming up in the next year. And if you're joining us from wherever you're joining us, we'll also be having, I don't know where to look, so I'm going to make eye contact with you. We're also going to be doing a lot of events in Toronto as well, so be on the lookout for that. If any of the events that I mentioned are interesting to you, the programs are interesting to you, or the conferences, I can't remember what I mentioned to you guys, are interesting to you, make sure you come and speak to our wonderful team. So I will quickly introduce Maria, who is head of programs. You can wave at everyone, Maria. And Karina as well, who is director of operations, and they can answer any of your questions. Make sure you join us on social media as well, that way you can hear about all the events, not only ours. I want to thank District 3 again very, very kindly for allowing us to host our session out of here. And thank you to Queer Tech Montreal and Montreal New Tech for coming and supporting us as always, and for pushing our events as always. Thank you guys very much. And have a great night. Thank you.